Okay, everybody, well, let's go ahead and get started. So good morning, welcome. I know it's 8 o'clock in the morning, so it's early, but I appreciate everybody taking the time. I think we're gonna have a good conversation this morning. I think I know everyone, but for those who don't know me, I'm Jessica with the Community Foundation. And many of you have been a part of these listening sessions that we've been doing monthly. This is our sort of virtual version of the third Thursday sessions we normally do. But of course, these have been much more focused on how we as nonprofits navigate COVID-19. And I think today in particular, we've got some good discussion about not just meeting sort of our immediate needs as organizations, but how do we position ourselves well going forward. So just a couple kind of logistics and intros for the day. So our main focus today is going to be on this question of engaging donors and patrons during COVID. And we're incredibly excited to have Ruth and Rachel from the Moss Art Center who have done a really good job. I've heard from multiple people and have been a part of some of these engaging folks during the pandemic and rethinking what their work looks like in this kind of environment. And so I think that they've got a lot of really good things to share with us, and I'll do my kind of formal intro of you both in a moment. But a couple of logistics for everybody. So if you would just mute your mic. If you are not speaking, that helps kind of keep the background noise down. We do have a pretty small group, so there will certainly be some opportunity for discussion, but if there's something while Rachel and Ruth are talking that you want to make sure you get out there as a question, you can go ahead and write that in the chat, and then I will keep an eye on that, ask those questions, and then we can have some follow-up time. So before I turn it over to Rachel and Ruth, I wanted to give you a little introduction to the both of them. You probably know them and have seen them around town as well, and maybe worked with their organizations because they do, Moss does a lot of great work in the community. But I did want to kind of give you the official bio for both. So Rachel is the Associate Director of Advancement for the Moss Art Center, ICAT, which is part of the center and university libraries at Virginia Tech. And she oversees fundraising and donor stewardship. So some really good information and insight we're going to get from her. She's got over a decade of professional advancement experience. And prior to being at Virginia Tech, she served as the Leadership Giving Director at Kennesaw State University, working with a variety of nonprofits, including George Washington's Mount Vernon and the Foundation for Physical Therapy. So some great broad information. She's a graduate of Clemson University and has a master's degree in public administration. Ruth is the Associate Provost of the Arts and founding Executive Director of the Moss Art Center at Virginia Tech, which opened in 2013. Although I was reflecting, Ruth, that you have been in that job like 2007, 2009. I'm trying
2009.
2009.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember the dates of when it was.
Yeah.
So lots of good work before it opened. Ruth oversees the strategic campus-wide integration of arts at Virginia Tech and leads community-based arts initiatives on behalf of the university across the region. She's a University of Michigan graduate with more than 30 years of experience in nonprofit management in both arts and social service sectors. She was previously Director of Artistic Initiatives at the University of Maryland's Clarice Smith Center, which she helped to open in 2001. And prior to that, she was Executive Director of Volunteer Fairfax and Artistic Producer of the International Children's Festival at Wolf Trap, while she was at the Arts Council of Fairfax County. So both of our speakers have obviously great experience specifically in the arts, but I think a lot of broad experience as well that'll be relevant to all of our organizations here. So they are going to take it away. I'm going to stop sharing so we can see everyone. And Ruth and Rachel, I will turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much, Jess, and everybody. It's good to see faces, community faces here this morning. Yeah, Rachel and I thought, and this should be very, very conversational. So please, if you have questions, go ahead and put them there in the chat. But we were really reflecting on what seems eons ago, but this past spring when things shifted so suddenly, and talk a little bit about that and what we've done, and then our plans going forward and how we're hoping to manage all of the relationships that are so important to the Moss Arts Center. So obviously back in mid-March, we had to make a pretty quick decision based on well, the worldwide health crisis and university mandates. So it was about March 13, I think, when we had to pull the plug on 10 remaining performances in our spring season, which actually was about 32% of our season. So that was a pretty heavy thing to have to do. We had, even within that, a couple of sold out performances. So there was a lot of very, very quick communication with our patron base. And one of the things I think out of that was really wonderful, and of course we know we have a generous community and a fabulous patron base and donors here in our region, but so many people did not want their tickets refunded. They said, no, please keep that. We know you're going to need extra support going forward, which was something that was really wonderful. And probably a couple of weeks later, we realized, okay, summer events aren't going to be able to happen either. So we canceled those, and very, very quickly then our programming staff immediately said, what can we be doing in this time, even for the remainder of that semester and in the summer, to keep a presence? We want to make sure that we can fulfill our mission. We want to remain relevant to the people who have been supporting us and participate in all of the work that we do, and that's patrons and donors, and frankly, VT students, because a great part of our support of our program here comes from student fees. So it's incredibly important that we maintain some sort of presence and be doing things. So we dug into our video vaults that we have. One of the just fortunate things is most cases when we have performances here, we'll do archival recordings of those. They're not really intended for broadcast, but that's a great example. Programming staff, our programming director, Margaret Lawrence, reached out to those artists from the past and said, would it be okay if we did a sort of limited streaming of the performances you had here? And of course, our colleagues across the country in the field, the artists and the agents we work with, and everybody was very, very quickly scrambling and looking for things to do. So we're fortunate that they were very generous in letting us do that. We got some visual arts materials up online really quickly. Was, here's something great we're doing, check it out. Sometimes it's like, we're not quite sure what the situation is going to be, but we want you to know that we're thinking about this and we're making plans and doing things. And I think throughout all of this, and with all people, including our own staff, I think the transparency is something that's just really critical, that people understand we're still here, we're still trying to do things. We might not have all the answers immediately, but that we need their support and continued participation. And then it also became really clear, of course, for us, for a season of performances, our season was all set for 2021 by mid-March. We had most of our artist contracts even done. We had a beautiful publication that had been designed, hadn't gone to print yet, which is a good thing. And so that was another piece layered right on top of that is, okay, this is clearly not just going to be a short-term crisis for us. We're going to have to rethink how we go into the fall and into the spring. So that meant backing up, pulling the plug on a lot of things that were already in place. I think one of the first meetings we had with our donors, we have what we call the Moss Arts Partners, and they're all donors to the organization. I think it's 28 people now that we have on that board. And so we pulled them in pretty quickly as well in April and had a meeting. We would have had, normally we do sort of 4-day-long meetings during the year with our board. And we pulled them together for an hour-long meeting on Zoom in April to say, this is what we have going on. Can you help us promote the online virtual programming that we've got and continue to get the word out for people? And again, in that spirit of generosity, I think our board members, to a person, we're like, how can we help? What can we do? We want to be involved. And so I think that was one of the biggest ways immediately we could think of as, help us keep our presence out there. And as I said earlier, with our patrons too, I think our regular communications, we do sort of a monthly e-news out to everyone. If you're a ticket holder, you'll get an email from us a couple of days before before a performance, you know, what's to know. So we kept up our regular communications as well, but didn't overwhelm people either. I think that's something I know just as a recipient of a lot of email. You know, if there some organizations are really sort of maybe over communicating, sometimes there are just too many hits with people. So that was something else we still kept in mind as well, is that everyone we're working with, our patrons, our donors, have a lot going on right now. And this is a pretty stressful time for people. So managing that communication, and our marketing team did a fabulous job, you know, keeping things up on our website, what's going on now, you know, what's happening with the building. Again, what don't we know, but what do we know, and what are we anticipating? So I think all of those communication pieces have been pretty critical in keeping people informed and feeling a part of what we're doing. So I'll maybe turn it over to Rachel. You can talk a little bit about, especially in the spring, because there were some pretty big shifts in terms of fundraising specifically.
Yeah, so on the donor side of the house, Virginia Tech as a whole, when the crisis started, immediately called back all the fundraisers. Like I was in Atlanta and Charlotte visiting donors, and so I'd immediately cancel any more visits and come back. And then they made the executive decision to just pause all active fundraising for the next couple of months. So we canceled our giving day that we had been planning on. We were not actively soliciting donors one-on-one. The one exception was if donors approached us in this time of crisis, we were allowed to have those conversations. But it was really to take a pause and really be a part of our, you know, global community of this is happening to us right now. We're all kind of adjusting and figuring things out. So that was really, I think it was the right call. We're seeing a lot of good responses to that in terms of we took an immediate hit and maybe some annual donations and things like that. But we're now, people feel a deeper relationship with us is kind of the conversations I've been having now, because we were caring for our community and caring for them as part of our community at that time. So the part that was important though was we didn't want, similar to Ruth said with ticketing patrons, we didn't want to completely disappear off the face of the earth and them not hear from us even though we weren't fundraising. So we, after the Moss Arts Partners chat with our advisory board, we decided to do a similar chat for some of our highest level donors to keep them in the loop on kind of what was going on at the Moss Arts Center. And so we kind of pulled some lists together and created two afternoon 1 hour chats where donors could join us on Zoom like this and could chat with Ruth and Margaret Lawrence, our program director, and Katie Gert, who's in charge of our box office and ticketing and marketing. So we really had kind of the range of experts available that they could answer questions and kind of give them a general idea of where we were at. I'll say the challenging thing I think that we all felt at first is we're used to like presenting, this is what we're doing and here's the plan. And it was very much just a moment of honesty and transparency of, we don't know what's going to happen. And so we were sharing that with them and saying, these are the things we're thinking about, and, you know, getting feedback and getting questions from them that made us think of things we hadn't thought of before. I know that those initial talks gave me a lot of thought and hope for interactions with people outside of the New River Valley, because we have a handful of supporters outside of our immediate area, but they don't often get to come to the Moss Arts Center and engage with our programming. And so some of those donors showed up on those Zooms and were like, we're so excited that you're going to be doing more stuff virtually and we're going to be able to participate. And so it was good to get that feedback that more people were going to be able to be involved with us because of some of the changes we were having to do. But yeah, after the first couple months, then we slowly got back into fundraising. It was really more just emails to donors saying, how are you? Asking permission, like we know things are weird, so we ask permission, like, are you in a place, is it okay if we talk about this? It's okay to say no, that now's not a good time. So really just giving them all that power versus coming at them really hard and saying, the Moss needs your money right now. So that was a little bit of a shift for us as well. But like I said, we got a really good response to that change.
And then really the next thing that we had lined up was, it's hard to remember dates now, I guess it was July 30. We did a private preview for our special donors. And what we've traditionally done in the spring, usually sometime in April, late April, we do what we call a private preview, and that's for our top level donors and our gold and premier subscribers. And it's something that people really look forward to, you know, as a special event. We have a reception on stage, and we release the season and talk about the artists who are going to be coming. And we wanted to maintain, you know, something special for that same group. So we did a virtual private preview, which accomplished the same things, except of course without the reception and anyone else here in the building. But I think that was really well received also. And then we added this year, something we haven't really done in the past, was a public preview. Since we had the format and we had all that information, then a week later, we were able to do that for the broader public as well, to get people excited. Because what we've done now is we've created a virtual series for this fall. We're calling it Home Stage. And it, you know, was a challenge. Some of, a good number of the artists actually were in the schedule for live performances. So it was, you know, talking to them about how could we convert to a virtual platform. How can we make this special too? So it's not just you're going to sit and watch a concert, but there will be a lot more interaction with the artists and conversation with, you know, the audience, and moderated conversations on. So, you know, that was something really special and interesting and different to put together. I think what we're discovering now too, since we've done the previews, among our donors and our regular patrons, is they are spreading the word to people, you know, family across the country. Like, look, you can check this out. You can sign up and see these programs. And, you know, I've said this before, but it really is a silver lining that we're able to reach now a much broader public and audience using these platforms. And it's, you know, we're working right now on our strategic plan, and the university has a new strategic plan. And with all of this sort of landing right in the middle of that process for us, I think it really does make us think about opportunities in all of this that, you know, we can continue. Hopefully COVID is not forever, but beyond COVID, can we continue to provide programming and content to people in some of these ways? And I think that's kind of exciting because it is challenging for us, particularly, you know, the university as a whole. Obviously we have a large alumni base, and if you're the College of Engineering, you've got, you know, engineering alumni all over the world, and you can connect with them and cultivate them as donors because they care about the college and it's their alma mater. For us, we don't have a built-in constituency like that, certainly among alumni. But now we really can have a much broader reach, I think, nationally with Virginia Tech alumni who care about the arts. And as Rachel said, you know, don't live here, so maybe can't participate directly. But that really is something I think that's really interesting and strategic for us as we think forward with all of this. Let's see. Yeah, so the private preview, you know, we continue to want to, and I think that's been a challenge too. How do we steward our donors and make them feel special? You know, some of the things that, you know, in the past, if, you know, our 5,000 plus donors, we talked to them and they could have their name associated with a particular program if they wanted. And we couldn't really do that this year for a lot of reasons. Number one, we still aren't sure what programs will really go forward. You know, we do have things scheduled for this spring, but each week we're getting, you know, some artists who fall out of the schedule because of travel restrictions, their own concerns, and so on. So, you know, there wasn't any reliable way to say, okay, Rachel, you know, you're going to be sponsoring XYZ string quartet if we aren't really sure that they'll be able to make it here. So that's another big area I think we're really working on now. And again, Rachel can kind of talk about some of the ideas. And we're starting to get ideas from our donors and our Moss Arts Partner Board as well about some interesting things to do. I don't know, Rachel, if you want to talk about some.
Yeah, so as we're looking forward, we're really looking, like we said, at our opportunities to virtually engage donors outside of virtual performances and around those. So some of the things we're really looking at and prioritizing are, we want it to be something that's fun and engaging, but also highlights the mission of the MOS and what we're doing, which can be a fine line to walk. And so we're looking at things like having artist engagements if we can, also partnering with partners in the community and at Virginia Tech. So one thing we're exploring right now is a partnership with the libraries. So working with a special collections person to do a special kind of engagement opportunity for donors prior to a performance that provides them more information and maybe some historical detail related to that performance. I haven't told Ruth this because I just got this email, but my alma mater, Clemson, their Performing Arts Center just emailed me because they're doing art classes. So once a month, they reached out to alums and said, you know, what do you do? Are you a crafter? Are you an artist? What is something you're comfortable teaching? And so that's what they're doing as an engagement opportunity, is to provide those opportunities for people and just making a place where people can come together and interact with you and have fun and not just be talked at, because we've all Zoomed a lot lately and we're all getting Zoom fatigue frequently. So making it a little more interactive. I've seen cooking classes. So yeah, just think about think about each other if you can partner with each other, and think about your community partners. Like, you know, is there a restaurant that is a strong partner with you that would do appetizers demo, and you could talk about, what's going on at your nonprofit while people are making this appetizer with this chef. So think about things like that can be a little more engaging, but also, like I said, keep tied to your mission. The other thing I was going to say related to this that was really interesting to me is the virtual background. So the Moss Arts background behind me is one of our virtual backgrounds, and as we started using these, donors started emailing me and be like, hey, can I have some of the Moss backgrounds? Like, I want a Moss background. So if you're in a nonprofit where that's something that may be of interest, or maybe it's, you make one with a logo or something in the background, people are more than happy, I think, to have that as a way to show that they support your nonprofit when they're Zooming in other meetings, and that might generate conversations with them to talk about what you're doing. So that's been another thing I've learned through all this.
Mm-hmm.
The other kind of part of that's kind of the good donor stewardship, getting groups together to have fun. The other side of it, from a fundraising side, is the one-on-one conversations. So we started doing virtual donor conversations one-on-one through Zoom, and there are pros and cons to it for sure. I'll say I do enjoy being able to have instant access to information. So when we're talking, I can be like, oh, let me show you this video of these students interacting with that artist and how your endowment supported that. So there's that ability to share screen and really demonstrate your mission in a good way. It's good because you don't have to pay to travel or to feed people, or for scheduling purposes. You can have a lot more Zooms in a short period of time than you might be able to schedule breakfast, lunch, and dinners. Also for leadership, being able to get board members to be engaged in a donor conversation with you. It's a lot easier for Ruth to hop on a Zoom than to travel across Virginia with me. And so that has helped a lot from that point. Kind of the challenges that I've seen so far have been around reaching out to new prospects. So people that we don't have a relationship with yet, we don't really know, and trying to get them to Zoom with you for the first time is a little bit challenging. What's the tactic that's been helpful has been finding someone that they know, like if it's a volunteer or a board member, to be a part of that conversation. So hey, let's the three of us have virtual coffee and chat. Very non-committal, this is not the fundraiser coming after you kind of approach. We haven't done this, but other areas of the university have shared that at other times, because it's hard for deans to travel and provosts to travel, it's been very exclusive access to interact with those people. And so because this is a little easier for everyone to do scheduling wise, looking at getting together, hey, I've got these prospects that don't have a relationship with us yet. Can we get them together? Would they be willing to come together and have a chance to talk to Ruth? So maybe someone who's a little bit colder and not as close to your organization, that this might be a good opportunity to see if they'd even show up for that, and if they're a little bit warmer than maybe you thought. Let me see, yeah. And then the other challenge that I'm just kind of rolling with right now as it happens is some people just aren't comfortable talking about financials on the phone or on Zoom. And so a lot of those conversations, we're just keeping them engaged, giving them information from us. This has happened particularly with planned gifts and really larger major gifts. People are just they're not comfortable on Zoom. They've seen things about Zoom being possibly, exploited and things like that. And so we're just really honoring and respecting their wishes and saying, okay, when things are better and we can come visit you, like we will come see you and we'll talk about this in person. Here's information about what our priorities are, and just really having those conversations to keep the ball moving, but pausing on the actual closing of a gift right now. If there's anything else. Yeah, I think those are kind of my big talking points there. I do think a lot of these changes in fundraising that are happening because of COVID, I think elements of this are going to stick and are going to become just part of how we do our work now as nonprofit professionals. So it'll be interesting to see which parts hold on. But I know the university in particular is very excited about saving a lot of money on sending gift officers all over.
Well, we do have some questions. That's a great overview and a lot of really good tidbits I've written down. But diving in a little bit more, so Terry asked, and first complimented, because I think the response from your donors about being deeply engaged just shows the kind of relationship building you all do. What are some of the main ways that you communicate with donors and patrons? So those main avenues, is it email? Is it phone calls? Is it mail? And have you seen any differences in that during COVID?
Yeah, well, and it's sort of multi-layered, I would say. To the sort of broad-based patrons and donor base, we do monthly email, and then we do specific emails around performances or particular opportunities. So those are ongoing, and that's the very broad-based. With our Moss Arts Partners, that's a much smaller donor board. We're regularly communicating about meetings, and I would say what's changed most since the COVID is we're more frequently in touch with them. So really, I think and I think this is an exciting thing. I think leaning on them much more as advocates and our closest sort of inside folks. So our communication has just been a lot more frequent. I think I mentioned more frequent meetings, shorter Zoom meetings, but getting people together. We're getting all of those working committees going now to have meetings. So I think it really feels like they're part of the family, and I think that's really important that they feel that way, that they're having an impact and can be helpful to us, even just to be sounding boards for us. One of and this is related to development, in the past, we've always listed all of our donors in our printed programs, just straight alphabetical list, regardless of what level of giving. And we had some feedback in the past year, pre-COVID, from people saying, well, why don't you list people by the giving levels? We think that would be nice. So it was really important for us to talk to our donor board and say, how do you all feel about that? And they represent our community. And is that something that people would like to see? Are there reasons not to? Are there pitfalls and all of that? So that actually is a change that we're making. It's a lot of good list management work that's been going on lately. Even though we're not doing printed programs this year, but we'll have those in virtual programs. That kind of feedback has just been really, really essential. So I would say the communication with the sort of inner core has been much more frequent and focused on feedback that we need from them as well. Yeah, but otherwise we haven't increased, I would say, with our patrons. We've tried to maintain the steady presence that we've had and not overwhelm people. And that seems to be working so far.
And I'll add, in addition to the Moss emails from, the Moss Arts Center at large, JP, who's our annual giving officer, and I reach out frequently to people one-on-one from an email. Sometimes our Moss Arts Center emails go to spam. I know we all hate that feature, but sometimes getting it from an individual person's email address seems to make all the difference in the world in getting a response. And if we don't hear from someone in a while, we'll follow up with a phone call if we have a phone number, usually just to make sure people are okay and are doing well.
And that's something we regularly do as well, is reaching out with our major or principal gift folks. We kind of have a regular system of just making sure we're touching base with those donors.
So we have some other questions as well around the new donor avenue. And Rachel, you talked about it a little bit, but maybe going into a little bit more depth about how you're trying to engage new donors during this time, and particularly sort of how well that process is going. So has that cultivation process, has it borne fruit for you guys, or how are you approaching that? Maybe talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so like Ruth mentioned, I'll say that some of the other units on campus are a little more spoiled in that they have a natural, potentially interested donor base to go to with alumni. So we're a little bit more like a traditional nonprofit in that our supporters could come from anywhere, and we don't necessarily know for sure until we ask someone if they're interested. So I think our best tactic as far as bearing fruit has been relying on our volunteers and kind of those networks to help us introduce ourselves to people. So really encouraging them to, share names with us. If this is someone you think might be a potential future donor or future board member, and really doing it in a way so that our volunteers understand that we're not going to do anything with that without their permission. So for each person that's brought us someone, we have had an individual conversation with them and said, okay, you know this person best. This is your relationship first. We don't want to break that and damage that in any way. So what is the best way to go about this? Because everyone interacts with their network in different ways, and understandably so are protective of those networks. So that's been really helpful for us, particularly in generating leads for board members. And then we've got a group, some of you may remember them. They're called the New Virginians. So they were a singing performing groups from like the 70s through the 90s at Virginia Tech. They traveled all around the country. You can YouTube them if you don't know them and enjoy some videos from the 70s. And so we've had a task force of kind of some leadership from within that group that we've been working with and kind of have adopted them as ours. So really it's been focused on creating engagement opportunities for that group who are naturally drawn to each other and want to spend time together and value the arts. So we're having to pivot a little bit. We were supposed to host them in person this summer during Virginia Tech's reunion. We were going to hold programming just for New Virginians at Moss Arts Center, let them do a workshop and get to sing and play together again. So we're kind of pivoting that and trying to do something online and virtual with them now. But yeah, that's really been the focus, I think, for us. We did have, as Ruth mentioned, many people generously decline their ticket refunds in the spring. And so we are looking at those as potential prospects as well for future annual gifts, because they've sent us the signal that they are philanthropic in some way by doing that.
Right, and in our patron base, of course, that's a pipeline for new donors as well. And yeah, so that's an important group. Just more questions.
Yeah, so are there more questions from the group? Or as well, we've got a lot of really great organizations on the call, so I wonder if any of you have things that you've done at your individual organizations as well, akin to what the Moss Center has done. I know one of the things that I've been thinking about as I've been listening, and I think we struggle with all as small organizations is kind of what do we have the capacity to do, right? So that's one thing where, you know, Moss has some great infrastructure behind it. What I was struck by and what you were talking about is how really simple a lot of the avenues are. So using these Zoom calls, having one-on-one conversation, I think it's easy to sit back and think, well, gosh, if you've got, I mean, the notion that you would even have like gift officers at some of our organizations, I'm like, well, that would be nice. I was like, I get to be advancement officer and gift officer. It's lovely. But what I'm struck by is just how sort of genuine and simple the mode of communication is. And it's really more about the nature of the conversation that you're having that I think is really quite useful to all of us. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, I'm curious about kind of the nature of the messaging. So one thing I have been told is don't do a lot of like, you know, now more than ever kind of language, or like, you know, that kind of thing where you're really kind of leaning into that, like, you know, we need you now more than ever language. I'm wondering if you have heard the same thing, or what your approach has been in terms of the way that you're talking to folks about what's needed at this point.
I'll share. I think the key messaging versus the now more than ever language has been around how does contributing to the Moss Arts Center, like how are we relevant to helping our community during all of the, you know, kind of social discord and the pandemic and everything that's going on right now? What is the Moss's role to our community in repairing that and coming back from it? Because I will argue that every nonprofit, whether directly impacting things that have happened with COVID or not, plays a role in bringing our community back together. If you're not sure what yours is, let me know. We'll figure it out. But for us, it's the arts. Like, we provide the arts as that place to have those social discord conversations. Like, it's a safe place to do that and to be exposed to new cultures and different opinions. On top of just mental health, I would argue at this point, like having the arts to engage with has been even more critical to our community. So that's kind of the messaging that I'm working with and going with, because I think it's better than the now more than ever.
I'm sure I've used the words now more than ever, but yeah, and understanding, and something else that we've talked about with donors and with our community too is the sort of the scale of the impact of this on the arts and artists. I mean, it's devastating to musicians and artists and theater companies, dance companies. I mean, you can imagine they can't rehearse, they can't be together. You know, we worked with one fabulous company this summer. They're based in Chicago, called Third Coast Percussion, four guys, a quartet, and they decided early on in this that they were going to basically, you know, be in their bubble together so they could go into their studio and do work, you know, really smart and able to do things. But I mean, if we want to have arts in the future, it's just critical that we're supporting the arts now and you know, and I'm so impressed with how our field has come together as well, and the conversations that are going on. You know, Margaret, our programming director, I think she's about 60 presenters across the country, and they meet weekly, and they're talking about a lot of things, you know, the logistical kinds of considerations and all of that. And then layered on top of that, you know, we're all looking at the social justice issues and Black Lives Matter, and how do we address this? This needs to come into our strategic planning now as well, and it's part of the conversation. So it's sort of a very interesting time, I think, in our field. And everybody needs one another to support one another. And those are important messages, I think, for our community to understand too. You know, it's not just sort of a transactional relationship that we have, but either way, you know, we pay the artists and they come and do their job, and patrons buy their tickets and come and see a show. It's much deeper than that, and we know that. And I think that's what helps with fundraising, if you can find those connections that people feel.
Other questions from the group or reflections on what's worked well at your organizations?
I see a note here too about educational opportunities. Just
Yeah.
we are planning those. And for heaven's sakes, if anybody has a complicated situation, it's our school systems. So depending on how things go, we are hoping maybe in some in-person school matinees and work, but certainly virtual and streaming. Big questions now are, do you do that asynchronously, or is it a set time? When are kids in classes? I mean, with the crazy way schedules are happening, there's an awful lot to be seen, but that's built in, sort of really baked into all of our programming, both for K-12 and for university students as well. So yes, we're hoping and planning as best we can to do those things. Oh yeah, local artists. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I was going to say, Pat, you're absolutely right. So one thing maybe you can talk about is, I know you guys have done a series, I think John Catherwood Ginn was hosting, of local artists, which was, I attended the one for Adair Theater. I just absolutely adore them in general, but I just loved that program. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, so I don't know if that was kind of pre-planned before COVID and you just moved virtual, but that seemed to me to be a strategic way that you wanted to keep the programming going. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, that was a new idea. In the spring, we started out doing, we set up a few chats that were kind of with staff on topics, really, really informal. And they were sort of not a big attendance, mostly it was other staff. We thought, well, looking around, and part of our role is, we're obviously a major arts organization, sort of, the big arts organization around here. How can we also be supporting the full community of the arts? And we just thought it would be really wonderful. We have fabulous artists around here. Let's pull them in. So we had Joe Kelly, who's a painter, artist, visual artist. We had Rachel Rue, who's a choreographer. She did a great program as well, and it included some live performance. She was in our lobby. We had our Annie Stevens, who's a percussion faculty member, in her home studio. So they were performing live together. Just really, really wonderful. And that was when we also saw this extended community of participants and audience, because we had people tuning in from all over to watch them. Of course, they had family and friends and, across the country. But you start to realize the impact is really huge. And then, of course, Adair Theater. I was excited about that because I didn't know that much about Adair Theater, and they're incredible. What a great resource here in our community. So I think each one of those was really well attended, and it was great to see that kind of support for the homegrown arts, if you will, that exist here in our region. So yeah, that was our programming staff thought that would be something. And I think that is something we probably would continue and want to do in the future. I mean, it's really wonderful to celebrate the community that way.
Okay, I'm just following other questions. Terry, you've put a few things in from the Fine Arts Center. Are any questions you wanted to ask directly?
Oh.
Is your unmuting? Go ahead and unmute, Terry, if you have questions you want to ask.
Yeah, right. You're gonna have to type it all.
Hey,
Yeah,
thank you all. So we're kind of doing a reboot at the New River Valley Fine Arts Center for the New River Valley. We've just been trying to kind of reorganize, and we have a lot, I think, some ground to make up from just changes in leadership and stuff in the years. But anyway, I think I'm taking on the charge of trying to do better, like cultivating membership relations, because when people donate, they become members. That's kind of our language, kind of like your partners, I think. So I think we've just been keeping records real like pen and paper kind of thing. What do you suggest any good like database programs for keeping track of donors and the whole donor management system? Do you have any good recommendations, or any of you that are in the nonprofits in the room?
Yeah, I mean, so I am very spoiled in that the university invests in a blackballed product, which, as you all know, is not cheap by any stretch of the imagination. So that is what we use. Other platforms I've used, and I don't know what the cost is associated right now, but Salesforce is something that a lot of salespeople use that works too for nonprofits for tracking people. At the most basic, I've done, Excel spreadsheets and Access like
Yeah.
database kind of stuff
Okay.
out of Microsoft. Um,
Okay.
and I mean, it's a little bit better than pen and paper in that you're keeping track of it in a place that, is a little bit better saved. Hopefully not just on your desktop, save it somewhere other people can get to it, but still secure. But yeah, that's always a tricky one. And I mean, even with a larger database, it can be difficult to kind of, if you're trying to improve cultivation, track next steps. So I even use things like top 10 donors in Excel spreadsheet that has mapped out what I plan to touches I plan to make each month with those priority people. And then the other system I use that's free, that's not so much for donor tracking, but helps me keep track of things I need to do. I use ClickUp, and it's free software that will let you plan out both just little tasks like, okay, I know I need to talk to this donor within this week range or within a specific day, to I'm planning an event, and I can put in all of the tasks, and you can assign tasks to people. So if you are blessed to have a team, you can say, okay, I need this person to do this, and you can all access it, which is nice. And then Trello is the other product that I use. It's a little bit simpler than ClickUp, but that works. For example, Ben Knapp, who's our director for ICAT, he loves Trello because he can open it and he has an advancement block in there, and he can see where I've updated him on what I need him to do and due dates for those. So hope that helps a little bit.
And I think I can add on to that, that it's my understanding, at least a few years ago when we looked at it, that Salesforce allows a certain number of seats to nonprofits for free when you sign up. So that might be something worth looking into, Terry. And that is a great donor management system. You have to kind of get used to using it, because like any system, it's how you use it that matters. But Salesforce is definitely kind of one of the standard ones, and they do offer nonprofits free use of it for a certain number of users, but it's quite a few users as I recall. Other questions or thoughts from the group? Anything else? Any final reflections as we wrap up our hour?
If you don't mind, I'll just piggyback on what Rachel was saying about, and Ruth was saying about how becoming this digitally connected, virtually connected, all these enterprises. I'm a pastor of a church, and when we had to go to Zoom worship, next thing we knew, we had people Zooming in from Alabama and Tennessee, North Carolina, because they've had an affiliation with us, but they can't physically worship on Sundays with us. So what we discovered, like you all, is whatever has expanded our reach through this, we're going to keep it going. So even when we eventually get back into worship, we'll keep a machine communicating with, if people want to Zoom in from other places on a Sunday morning. So it's interesting to see what has emerged that may stick, like you say, Rachel, like what's going to stick from all this. And it's been a real learning experience for everybody that's used to major in-person services.
Right.
The social world, I mean, I think about all of our nonprofits that do social work, how challenging it's been for them to do the people-to-people connections. And performing arts is certainly that way. So it's really been interesting to see that there's been fruit born out of a trying situation, So, but thanks for sharing everything. One thing I'll say real quickly, I went on while you all were talking and made a donation to the Moss Arts Center.
Oh,
I don't know if you'd like to, I want to be one of your partners, but I don't know if there's a way for you to, like with the Give Local NRV, we had a way to say, I'll cover the fee. I don't know if you've looked at that, but I knew I couldn't opt to cover my processing fees. So I don't know if that's something you want to look at for your own reaping greater benefits from online donor support. But I like being able to have that option to say, I'll cover the I'll cover the $4 or whatever. So
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. We'll have to, yeah, all of our donations run through the Virginia Tech Foundation. They're kind of our stewards for our gifts in that way. And so, yeah, it's a bigger conversation than just me, or it would already be happening.
Part of a big body.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
You tell the Virginia Tech Foundation to come talk to the Community Foundation. We'll tell you all about how that works. We did a lot of research on which system we were going to get local, and that fee covering thing is awesome.
It is. It is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, just thank you all so much for the insight that you've provided. I think anytime we can just talk to one another about how we're navigating and what we're doing. I have shared, I think almost every time I've been in a meeting with a donor or on a call, just how impressive it is that the nonprofits in the community have pivoted quickly and how they're doing things. And just looking at the set of nonprofits here, it's exactly the same thing. I mean, there's so many of you in here that have continued your work, been incredibly innovative in how you've done so. So we have a lot to learn from one another. And I just appreciate Ruth and Rachel, you talking in particular about the great stuff that you've been doing at the Moss. A couple quick announcements as we wrap up, in the vein of kind of bragging about everything that you all are doing. In the email that we sent out advertising this listening session, there is also a link for our nonprofit feature Fridays. So Ashley wave to everybody. Ashley is our marketing and communications person at the foundation, and she is going to be doing a social media campaign that talks about the different nonprofits in the community. So you have a chance there to click and put some information about yourself so that we can at least every Friday feature a nonprofit that we work with. So make sure that you take a look at that, and we'll send the link around again as well in future emails. And then we're also still collecting information about how your organization is doing during COVID, as well as training opportunities that would be helpful. So that again was another link in that email. It just takes a few minutes, but if you could just give us an update on how you're doing, excuse me. And if there's a particular topic, one of the ones that we got was reaching out to donors virtually. So that's how I reached out to Ruth to get them to come. So if there are specific things that you really want to hear about, go ahead and fill out that survey, or of course, just send an email to us so that we can work on that. So with that, we'll have our next listening session in September. Thank you all so much for the work that you're doing. And thank you again to Ruth and Rachel. It was so nice to have you guys, and we just appreciate the time you gave.
Of course, yeah. I'll just say if anyone has questions or anything that comes up later, just needs to bounce ideas off, please feel free to email me. Happy to chat anytime. I'll throw my email in the chat for everybody.
Perfect. Yeah. And we will also post this recording as well as I'll put the couple slides that I had at the beginning. I'll add your emails in there and put those so folks can access that as well.
Great.
All right. Well, everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you again so much.
Take care, everyone.
Hey, everybody.